our conversations were always very consistent with what we thought that this organization was going to do. So next topic we're going to talk about is, what would you tell fans that wanted the big move this deadline and didn't get it, why it didn't happen, and why it may possibly happen maybe this summer, maybe down the road? Why do you think that Trajan and this front office decided to just stand pat right now?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. So we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but again, the Pistons did not have a first round pick that they could reliably have traded at this deadline because of the fact that when they went and got Isaiah Stewart in the draft, they traded a first round pick at the time, and it was heavily protected, so it continued to still belong to the Pistons. It will finally convey this offseason because the Pistons will, no longer be a lottery team because of it. They won't be bad enough to still have their pick. On top of that, if they were to have made a move and to have done it without being able to really trade any first round draft capital, you would have had to have given up at least two of your young players. So the conversation I would have with those fans is, who do you give up? Do you give up Jaden Ivey? Do you give up Asar Thompson? Do you give up Jalen Duren? Especially with how good that they're playing right now, I just don't know, that there's necessarily an incentive to do so. And then the other thing as well is, and I think this is just kind of the biggest thing is, as much as the Pistons want to improve their roster and to go get a star to help this team going forward, for one, I don't really know who you could have really gotten at this deadline because a lot of the big stars or a lot of the big fishes, so to speak, were kind of moving elsewhere. And the big thing is, no matter what move they make, it's not really changing what they're doing this season. So for me, the biggest thing is the rest of this season is really for them to continue to evaluate and see what they have in house. And especially the playoffs are going to be the best evaluation period for who these guys really are. Because when
Mm-hmm.
that pressure's, turned up, when the heat is on, that's when you see who players really are. Specifically, you see if they're ready for this, you see how far they need to go to be ready for it, and you see who just naturally rises to the occasion and shines in that moment. So for me, it's always been about evaluating this team, giving it at least a season, seeing what this group is about, and then going into the summer when a lot of other teams realize who they are, but also who they aren't. That's generally when you see more players become available because that's really the big thing. Like Luka Doncic aside, because absolutely nobody saw that coming. Like, yes, you saw Jimmy Butler get moved, you saw De'Aaron Fox get moved, but some of those things were, largely kind of telegraphed and we kind of saw, coming for the most part. So for me, it's like you really have to play your time, like play your cards right, and it's really all about timing. And it was too early for this group, especially with what they didn't really have as far as assets to give up.
Yeah, the player I'm going to bring up, and we talked about him a lot, is Brandon Ingram. He was the one player that Pistons fans were pounding the table for. Funny enough, he actually got traded for two former Pistons to go to Toronto. But I look at Toronto and I look at like what their core is. I think they'll be improved, but my only question with the fit there is like, you still have RJ Barrett, you still have Scotty Barnes, you have Brandon Ingram. Like, someone's going to have to sacrifice their offense, and it's not going to be Ingram. I would also say the Pistons fans is you didn't really have. You have a first round pick to trade. I will say that in 2028, I believe. But I think a lot of these teams want first that are not 3 years out. They want
Right.
more first. Like this year's draft, I think was very crucial. The Bulls got their draft book back because they know that this draft is going to be really good because they traded Zach LaVine.
Yeah, the only teams you really want long term out are like Phoenix, who are going to struggle in the long term because of the decisions that they made.
Yeah, it's like I get fans want to be better and they want to make the big splash. They want to make that big move. It's going to come, and I think Trajan needs a little bit more time then a few months to pull the trigger. Like he
Yep.
mentioned at that press conference, if you guys haven't watched it on the Detroit Pistons YouTube channel, saying that like it entered our mind. We had an internal discussion as an organization about possibly, making a move because we're much improved and we're ahead of the timeline of which we thought we were going to be because Trajan said, I didn't think we're going to be in the playoff spot. Uh, but at least they're having conversations.
Yep.
And I think they just want to evaluate everyone. They want to give JB a full year of, working with a Duran, working with a Cade, an Ivy, a Sar, a Ron.
Yep.
They want to see what he can get out of those guys. And as of late, Jalen Duran is probably playing the best basketball of his young career. For the last month or so. The first couple months of the season, I just kind of gave him a pass because it's another new coach, another new system to try to learn under. But like as of late, man, he's been playing really good ball. He's looking like a double machine night in and night out. But I would just tell fans like, I know we preached patience for the past 5 years. You got to give Trajan a little bit more time to see what he actually has before he pulls that trigger for that next big move.
And you only get that type of move so many times in your tenure. You want to make sure it's absolutely, without a doubt, the right player that you're bringing in, because you were a lot nicer about that Toronto trade than I am, because I think that was a horrible move for the Raptors to make. I mean, listen, like, don't get me wrong, you got a guy to put alongside Scotty Barnes. Like you like, yes, your floor is inherently better. This team gets very expensive very quickly to be very mid. Like, you're going to build around Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett. This is a team that's already going to be, more than likely well in the first apron because of the contracts that they have. And I'm sorry, but like, I just don't know how much Brandon Ingram really elevates this team to where this is a worthwhile move for them to make, especially when you look at the fact that this is more than likely going to hinder their lottery odds to get a Cooper Flag going into this, going into this draft class, which like is really what you should have been focused on if you are the Raptors, because you were actually tanking for the first time. Like, you actually like had a direction, and now you're just going like, yeah, Scotty's going to have this incredible season next year and we're going to be really good really quickly. But I just don't see it with this group. Like, yes, they have some young talent, but I just don't think Brandon Ingram is someone that's going to be this massive franchise lifter. And again, he's someone that's not really consistently available. And I'll just keep hitting this until the cows go home. If Trajan Langdon wanted Brandon Ingram, he probably could have had him by now. If there's anybody that knows Brandon Ingram as a person, his injury issues, all of those things, as we have established on the show before, it is Trajan Langdon. So the fact that there was never even a sniff of interest from the Pistons when it comes to Brandon Ingram should probably tell you everything there is to know.
It's funny because like if you look, Sean, they're kind of falling into the territory of like, what's the last big free agent that they signed that like off the top of your head?
For the Pistons?
No, the Raptors.
Oh, the Raptors? Really never. Like that, like Kawhi, Kawhi was their big acquisition via trade, but then he immediately left. So like like Toronto historically, like this was their free agent move, which is why they did it. Yeah.
Exactly. Like they had to use one of the draft picks that they got in the Siakam trade from the Indiana trade, sending him to Indiana. And I'm thinking like that's kind of like that's going to be their free agency acquisition. It would be hilarious if Brandon Ingram left.
Well, you're gonna have to sign him to at least you're gonna have to sign him to at least $50 million a year. And I just don't know if Brandon Ingram's worth that money at this stage in his career. And especially someone who needs the ball in his hands. Isn't Scotty Barnes, his whole thing, his ability to be a playmaker, to kind of be like a, kind of a point forward that can help, facilitate and set guys up. Like, that's not Brandon Ingram's game. It didn't really work out very well alongside, a Zion. So I just to be quite frank with you, I just don't like the move. And again, I just don't, I didn't think the fit next to Cade would have been the greatest either. I could be wrong, but I mean, again, I think there's a reason why the Pistons are staying patient, because you never know how this could develop. And the guy that they really want could become available sooner than you think.